I'm going to call the meeting to order. If I could please have a roll call.
Commissioner
Here.
Commissioner McDaniel,
Here.
Commissioner McCowan,
Here.
Commissioner Jablonski,
Here.
Commissioner Byrd,
Here.
Commissioner McClure, Commissioner Griffith, Commissioner Kendall,
Here.
and Commissioner Parker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Starting with our consent items. Item number 1, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of the minutes as follows of the Planning Commission meeting minutes of April 10th, 2025. Item number 2, certificate of survey, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of COS-2425-10, consideration of Norman Rules certificate of survey submitted by SRB LLC for the Rock Creek Ranch for 190.63 acres of property generally located at the northeast corner of the intersection of East Rock Creek Road and 48th Avenue Northeast. And does any member of commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Seeing none, I would take a motion
Move to approve.
and a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Moving on to our non-consent item, starting with item number 3, the consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance O-2425-37, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending section 36-201 of chapter 36 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove lots 13 and 14 and block 15 of the T.R. Wagner's First Edition to Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma from the CCFBC Center City Form-Based Code, detached frontage, and place the same in the CCPUD Center City Planned Unit Development District and providing for the severability thereof, 427 Sims Street. And do we have a staff presentation?
Good evening. Anna E. Starr. I'm here with the Planning Department. This is 427 West Sims. It is a request to rezone from Center City Form-Based Code detached frontage to a CCPUD. The proposal is for a triplex, and it will be a 2-story residential building. And they're proposing 2 bedrooms on the ground floor and a 2-bedroom unit on the second floor. The main purpose of this request is to allow for the use of a triplex. And they're able to meet most of the requirements, except they will be extending a set of metal stairs on the east side of the building into the setback, and the finished floor elevation will be at grade. And this is, I should say, the existing zoning, which is Center City, and this is the existing land use, which you can see is surrounded by residential dwelling units. And here's an aerial of the property. And I would add that the proposal also will have the new building sitting at the 25-foot required build line as required in the CCFBC detached frontage. The applicant was not required to have a pre-development meeting, but did choose to have one in order to allow the residents to find out about the redevelopment. There were 2 residents that came to the meeting. They had questions about bedroom quantities and dwelling unit quantities and the design of the structure, which the staff from Crittenbrink Architecture answered, and they had no further concerns. The impact, and let me show you. Here's the view of the existing structure. It is a existing triplex right now. And then here's looking to the east, down Sims. And then here's looking towards the west, down Sims. And then this is to the south, another residential dwelling. And here is the alleyway looking west and alleyway looking east. I would note, as far as impacts, the previous rezoning request for this vicinity have sought to maintain the residential single-family character of the neighborhood. In 2016, the residents of the neighborhood successfully petitioned to downzone from R2 to R1, and then in 2017, when the CCFBC was adopted, it was designated as detached frontage, which allows for either a single-family dwelling or a single-family dwelling with an accessory unit. However, the applicant's proposal for a two-story triplex, while it does exceed the residential units allowed by the detached frontage, it is similar to what is already existing there, and it has a residential feel for the structure. So it's meeting the goals of the Center City Form-Based Code to increase the variety of housing types while maintaining that residential look to the structure. And I think that's it for me. Here is the site plan. The Centennial Park is located 2 lots to the east of this subject tract, and staff forwards this request for Center City Planned Unit Development and Ordinance O-2425-37 to the Planning Commission for recommendation and consideration to City Council. And applicants are present and have a presentation as well. And I can answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions by commissioners for the staff? Seeing none, I would take the applicant presentation. Thank you.
I may need your help. Good evening. My name is Mark Crittenbrink. I'm with Crittenbrink Architecture, and I'm here representing the client, Philip Reed. Tonight, they have the ones that own this property. It's on 427 West Sims. Well, let me say first, I am so glad I'm ahead of all of this. I just feel like I'm going to have a better night. So it's the existing building is a triplex. It has a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom unit up, and 2 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom units down. So it's 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. The lower level is 4 feet below grade, so it's really kind of a basement. It takes on water. It's pretty nasty. And so the owners came to us and they said, we'd like to tear it down and to build, a duplex or a triplex. 1 unit which would be theirs, or their children who go to school here, and the other one would be a rent unit. As Annie said, we're allowed a single family with an auxiliary unit of 650 feet to, if we're staying within code. But that's not where we are, and so that's why I'm here. What we developed, it's a 1,600 square feet. It's a 40 by 40 building. It meets all the criteria of the Center City Form-Based Code, as Annie said. We are approaching at grade level as opposed to stepping up, because I think that's reasonable, and it also the units on the first floor are accessible units. The other thing I'm getting ahead of myself. So we developed as a duplex because I thought we're never going to get a triplex, right? So I had a 2-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and I met with Councilwoman Grant, and we discussed it, and she said she felt like she could be in favor of it. And then the owner said, I think we started looking at the needs of the core area, what kind of housing they need. And we have lots of multi-bed units. What we don't have are 1-bed units. So the 2 units downstairs have about 750 square feet each. They are an open studio. There might be a wall between the bedroom, but self-sufficient studio. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, both on either side, and then it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath upstairs. So that's 1,600 square feet. So it is a triplex. I followed up with Councilwoman Grant, and she said, this is better because we're really needing those 1-bedroom units in the core area. That's a development that we would really like to support. So that's what we are here to support. I did ask because you went here on the back, and I will go through it now. I guess you can see what we have going on. So I press for.
Yeah, that one.
It's never obvious.
And
Okay, we went too far.
Yeah, you went. Here we go. Okay.
Oh, so that's not my presentation then, is it?
Well, oh, yeah, keep going. Sorry, there you go.
There we go. So you can see right here, you can see on the right is the 2-bedroom unit. It's fairly open plan, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. That rectangular area in the back is a common stair. Is a stair how they use to get up to the front, to the upstairs. And then on the left-hand side, you see the 2 one-bedroom units. Again, there's that stair area. They have their own bathroom, own kitchen, washer and dryer and whatnot. And they enter, the front entry is from the front on Sims for this property. However, the entry to get up on the back is we'll have 4 parking spaces along the back off the alley. So you can see on the back there that, is this a laser? No, okay. You can see on the back there how there's an entry. And this prompted a change from the owner because if they're going to tailgate here, right? It's a great location. And so they thought, but and you see there's a porch on both sides. We're trying to, create this very residential vibe. If we're down in front having a tailgate, we'd have to go all the way back around. So we did it at the last minute, add an open steel stair, which code says we can do if we have a city official to approve it. And we ran it through Jeff, and he was okay with it. That is the elevation. It'll be 2-story, again, with the front porch across the bottom. You have the unit on either side. The common entry in the front is in the middle, and then you see the second floor there. Tall ceilings, I think it'll be really nice. It kind of has Terra meets Bourbon Street vibe to it. So I think it's a really nice unit. I think it'll be great I live right across the alley from this, so this would be a welcome change for us and for the neighborhood. And I think that's it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for the applicant? All right. Seeing none, are there any audience comments? Any planning commission discussion?
Thank you.
Okay. And if there's no other discussion, I would take a motion on this item
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
and a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries.
Moving to our next items number 4, 5, and 6. Item number 4, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-120, a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending the Norman 2025 Land Use and Transportation Plan so as to remove part of the east half of the northwest quarter of Section 2, Township 8 North, Range 2 West of the Indian Meridian, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the very low residential designation and the low-density residential designation, and place the same in the low-density residential designation and future urban service area and suburban residential area, and place the same in current urban service area south of East Lindsay Street between 36th Avenue and 48th Avenue Southeast. Item number 5, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance O-2425-38, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending section 36-201 of the Code of the City of Norman so as to remove the east half of the northwest quarter of section 2, Township 8 North, Range 2 West of the Indian Meridian to Norman, Cleveland County, Oklahoma, from the A2 Rural Agricultural District and place the same in the PUD Planned Unit Development District, and providing for the severability thereof, south of East Lindsay Street between 36th Avenue and 48th Avenue Southeast. And item number 6, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of PP-2425-12, consideration of a preliminary plat submitted by Premium Land LLC for Ironwood Hills, a planned unit development for 77.97 acres of property generally located south of East Lindsay Street between 36th Avenue and 48th Avenue Southeast. The applicant has requested these items be postponed to the June 12th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Again, that is the June 12th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting. Is there any discussion, or I would take a motion for that
I
item?
make a motion to postpone the items to the June 12th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting.
I second.
Any other discussion? I would take a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast.
Thank you. We're going to move now to, we're going to hear the presentations for our next items all together. So I'm going to read all these agenda items. We're going to hear the presentations for all of them. We'll have the same public comment for all of them. We'll have any other discussion for all of them, and then we will vote on individually. So starting with item number 7, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-101, recommendation regarding the resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Item number 8, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-102, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Housing Strategy Plan. Item number 9, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-103, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman the AIM-Norman Water Utility Master Plan. Item number 10, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-104, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Wastewater Utility Master Plan. Item number 11, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-105, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Stormwater Master Plan update. Item number 12, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-106, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Transportation Plan update. And item number 13, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Resolution R-2425-107, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Parks and Recreation and Cultural Master Plan. After reading all of that, you can see why I was nominated to be the chair again. I will take the staff presentation. Oh, we have a presentation by committee first. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners, and Jane and Whitney. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear us this evening and to consider the AIM-Norman plan and all of the master plans that comprise it. We're just going to do kind of a quick introduction so that you can get into the in-depth presentations of each one of the master plans. I'm going to start just with an introduction. My name is Ingrid Jafrida, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the steering committee. I'm a resident of Ward 6. I used to be a resident of Ward 8, and I'm the executive director of WildCare Oklahoma.
Hi, my name is Siobhan Evans. I am the other co-chair. I am a realtor here at the Norman community, and I am a resident of Ward 5.
So first, I just want to say that it was an honor as well as a challenge to co-chair this process. We started in September of 2023. We anticipated a year, and obviously it went much past that because of the complexity of what we were trying to do. The land use plan plus all of the master plans and identify synergies and ways for all of those to work together. The process was long, and it wasn't without bumps and potholes, but the process did involve hundreds of Norman residents, and that's something that we're really, really proud of, and we're going to talk a little bit about, as well as, of course, city staff and consultants that provided the expertise and a lot of the very hard work of getting these plans done and done relatively quickly, at least in my opinion. We knew from the beginning that not everybody was going to be happy with every single thing and every plan, but that was the inevitable consequence or the inevitable outcome of compromise and consensus building. And this is the thing that I want you to hear from us tonight, is that all of the plans were passed out of their subcommittees unanimously. And all of those plans plus the land use plan were unanimously endorsed by the steering committee. And that's what our slides basically just include, is who was on those committees. They're all residents representing all of the different wards, representing a diversity of viewpoints, expertise, life experience, living obviously in different neighborhoods throughout Norman. And this is one of the things that we're really, really proud of. We also had partners invited that weren't voting members of the steering committee, but we invited them to be there to provide perspectives from all of these different organizations. And those that we bolded were the ones that attended every single meeting. And they did sit at the table with us, participated in the activities, and did everything except for vote on that final night. And we felt it was really, really important to have these different sectors represented. And then we had all of the different subcommittees. Each one was chaired by a member of the steering committee and then was comprised of other members from our community from outside of the steering committee. So we had even a greater diversity of viewpoints. So this is the housing subcommittee, the transportation subcommittee. Jim Adair, who is the chair of that, was a member of the steering committee, is here tonight. Amanda Nairn was the chair of the stormwater committee, also a member of the steering committee. The Water and Wastewater Subcommittee, and then the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Subcommittee. And so we really see these plans as the result of neighbors working with neighbors in a collaborative process to come up with what we did tonight. And we hope that you keep that in mind, you know, as you hear all of the different complexity that you're going to hear in all of the master plans. Oh, sorry, I forgot the land use working group. This is a working group and wasn't a subcommittee. So the subcommittees were actually something that was designed from the beginning, but we realized how much work had to be done on the land use part. And so part of the way through the process, a land use working group was formed and chaired by Patrick Schrenk, who's also here, and it is some sort of like genius when it comes to what's happening on every plot of land all throughout Norman. And you can see who served on that working group as well. There was a lot of community engagement, which I'm sure the consultants will go through. In addition to Siobhan and I going out and doing presentations to different community groups and the surveys that were online and the workshops that we held for the community, Siobhan and I even held one additional listening session for Ward 5 when some concerns came up around the turnpike and how AIM Norman was going to affect them. And it was just an open forum for people to come and share whatever they needed to share for as long as they needed to do that. So we tried to be as responsive as possible when concerns were raised in the community. Two more things. We were guided by these development principles, and you've seen these before, you're gonna see them again, but I do feel like we were really true to them, and I know in the subcommittee working groups, they really delved into these and let these be the guideposts for the mission and the goals of those different master plans that you're going to review tonight. And then finally, this was the mission that we kind of ended up with, kind of our environmental commitment. Many of us, like me just by design in terms of my profession, are very, very concerned about things like green space and environmental impact and wildlife habitat. But it wasn't just me, it was the entire committee. Everybody was committed to making sure that what we did protected Lake Thunderbird and the Garber-Wellington aquifer, and that we were considering the unique ecoregion that Norman is a part of. And so that really wasn't kind of our North Star. That's a term that's overused, but it was our North Star throughout the entire planning process. So I just want to make sure that that's also like kind of understood as you look at everything tonight. Siobhan, what do you have to add?
She covered it all. I would just reiterate that we did really try to have a diversity of thought. In our housing group, we made sure that we had a renter, someone who's very vocal about how hard it is to buy in this city. We also made sure that OU was at the table. And then again, making sure Inger and I fought for those partners to be at the table because we knew that their voice needed to be heard in their areas that they work in. So it is something that we really worked hard on along with city staff, along with consultants, of making sure that it was very fair, if you will, across the board. My science teacher in high school said fair is on 10th and May. It doesn't truly exist. So yes, everyone is a little bit upset about something, but we felt like for the overall, for the greater good, we did the best that we could.
So that's all we have, because we know that you have a lot to delve
Yes.
into tonight. But if you have any questions, we're happy to entertain them.
Is it on? I just wanted to point out, thank you so very much. I sincerely appreciate you. But I wanted you to take a look. We did have a printed copy of everything. So as we go through these plans tonight, this is representation of what came out of this 18-month process.
Yeah,
Thank-
I just had a request that we give a round of applause. I know we have a lot of plans to come, but this is a lot of work, so, yeah.
Thank you, that's really nice, and thank you for listening to us.
Okay. Yeah, come on up.
Great, thank you. Okay, this, I think I need my glasses for it. Yep, that's better. Okay, well, thanks. And, you know, before I'm going to talk a little bit about the land use and some of that public engagement, and also I'll share a little bit, you get stuck with me for the housing too. But before I start talking about that, I just want to pause and we gave some thanks, but I feel it would be remiss not to also thank everyone for helping us through this process. So I guess I should say, my name's Amy Haase. I'm with RDG Planning and Design. We were privileged to be brought on to assist the city in this process. And when we started this process, we knew that it was going to be challenging. And we knew it was going to be challenging for a couple of reasons. One, because no community has ever done a process like this, as far as I know. And two, we also knew that there were some issues out there that were really dividing the community and were frustrating for folks. But we knew that compromise would be the only path forward. But through the process, we also learned that there were many things that residents agreed upon. And our co-chairs mentioned a few of those, including protecting our water resources, finding better ways to deal with stormwater, having affordable housing for all of our residents today and for future generations, and for trails. We heard about trails in a lot of meetings too. But understandably, many residents are looking for certainty for how the future will unfold. But, you know, in 25 years of planning, and which has included a Great Recession and a pandemic, the one thing I know with certainty is that certainty is really hard to provide. The committee, though, should be commended for navigating those uncertainties, spending months thoughtfully considering the challenging issues, and ultimately building on areas of agreement to find compromise. The document should also not be viewed as a static plan that remains unchanged for the next 20 years, but rather it should be regularly reviewed and updated as we learn and grow over the next years. Okay, so as our co-chairs shared, we had a great group of folks who assisted us through this process, and we really appreciate it. You know, we have committees that work with us on every project, really, that we do like this, but this group really was all in and participated in ways that we very rarely see, so we really do appreciate that. We talked a little bit about the public input that we received. We had a project website that was established for this. We had over 24,000 visits to that. We did some monthly pollings, which we had over 3,000 total responses, many events, a citywide mailer that even went out in the fall of 2023, and really had the opportunity to talk with really every age group too. We met with high school students to seniors and everybody in between, and so we really do appreciate all that input that we received. So at the beginning of the process, we were gathering as much input as we could. We were also crunching the numbers. One of the things that we looked at is what do we think the future population for the community could be. I know there's been some questions around this over the last few weeks, couple months, but at the time, in 2023, we presented two methodologies, pretty common methodologies within the planning practice of what the future population could potentially be. The committee, I think, probably spent a couple meetings actually talking about this and voted on the scenario that got us to around 185,000 by 2045. I would also just emphasize that that's just kind of a starting point from which we work from. There was also lots of other input, and ultimately, at the end of the day, these are the types of things that should be reviewed regularly. It should be viewed again in 2030 when the new census comes out, and how does that maybe feed into any adjustments that need to be made. We wanted to point out a few key milestones. So the committee met 19 times. They spent more than one meeting on some of the plan's most challenging items. In other words, there was a lot of really thoughtful deliberation and discussion that went into that. The land use working group spent probably 15 plus hours and had over about 7 meetings or more, and a lot of detailed conversations, and really just got down parcel by parcel in some of that. And as our co-chair shared, there was ultimately a unanimous decision. We've been sharing in a number of presentations that this really is a different approach than your previous plan that you have, and how we're approaching this. There's several AIM Norman development principles that supported more of a flexible approach and encouraging more mixing of uses. That was something that we did hear a lot from community members. And so this approach really takes what we kind of describe as more of an intensity-based approach rather than just looking at single uses in a standalone environment, because we don't necessarily always live in that sort of environment or want to. A few things kind of definition-wise that we talk a lot about in the land use piece, and that's compatibility. And so compatibility is that relationship between different uses and how well they do or they don't fit together. Mixing of uses, again, this is something we heard residents talk a lot about. We often kind of define mixed use in 2 different ways, vertical or horizontal. So vertical is that building that maybe has a commercial on the lower level and residential up above, and horizontal is when we have an area or a district that has multiple different types of uses within it. Intensity, that's the extent to which the land is used and how the development affects its neighbors. And then finally, density, so how many housing units per area of land. There's kind of a 3-legged stool is how we started kind of talking about this when we were thinking about the land use plan itself and its relationship to some other pieces. Within the plan, we identified character areas, and the character areas really are built on what kind of fits in the environment. And really those won't change. That pretty much describes the environment that they're kind of in right now. The land use, this is what we want to see built in the environment. And these are areas that, as projects come forward, potentially could change. And then finally, your zoning and subdivision. And that's your kind of part of your implementing leg of the stool. On the character areas themselves, again, this is how the built environment kind of all fits together. We identified 9 character areas with kind of similar characteristics, and then the policies that were appropriate for those areas. And again, our committee spent quite a bit of time talking through that, trying to understand what the appropriate policies were within each one of these areas that really went back to the development principles and that kind of core commitment that our co-chairs shared. In 2040, then we also, within that character area, spent a lot of time specifically talking about the 2045 reserve area. I think, and this will feed into also the urban reserve area, which is one of our land uses. I think there was probably 3+ meetings that were spent on that, multiple map revisions, a lot of discussion about natural boundaries versus a street boundary, and then just trying to identify the policies that will be protecting the lake and kind of the environment that we really value, or that the community really values. And ultimately, this is where we came to on the map. On the land use side, again, land use is what we want to see in the built environment, and we have kind of areas that I'll describe as kind of leading more with their rural character than our urban neighborhoods. Those are leading a little bit more with the residential. Our mixed use employment, those are areas that are going to lead a little bit more with commercial or job-based uses. And then we have uses like open space and civic. As we shared, we spent quite a bit of time working through this, almost went parcel by parcel in some instances to make sure we were getting this as close to where we think it is today. And again, it sometimes is, there's an aspect to it that is a little bit of a snapshot in time that we have to continue to evaluate in the coming years to see if it's meeting where we need to go. when you look at each of the land use designations, so one of the things that we think is really important, especially for you as planning commission members, is, okay, we have this land use, what does that mean? So there should be a page to 2-page spread on each one of these land uses that will describe the building types, site design considerations, transportation, network and circulation access considerations, utility access, public space types, location, and even the zoning, potential zoning that we have in place today. So we really think, we hope that that's a good tool for you to be able to go to kind of better understand what does this land use mean versus urban low versus urban medium and so forth. I do want to take a little minute to talk about the reserve area. So the intent here really is to be preserving and protecting the area from harmful development, conserving the existing portions of land for future urban densities. Within these areas, acreage subdivisions would compromise the feasibility for future urban services. So we're really trying to kind of keep this area in almost like a static state, I guess you could say. It is a little bit, it is different from the 2045 reserve. The boundary isn't exactly the same, but the urban reserve does describe how development should be designed and if it would occur, if anything would occur in that area. But again, we're trying to kind of keep that from happening. And then finally is the implementation piece, where we try to describe out how the different intensities begin to work together. I really liked, we spent quite a bit of time, maybe not quite a bit of time, but we spent some good discussion with staff working through the diagram on the left, and I really do like the way it came out. Because I think it begins to show how the different land uses and their intensities overlap. And you might notice something like civic. It's actually interesting. I was actually having this conversation just last week with another community with regards to civic. And civic is one of those that's always challenging because its intensities can vary so much. You can have an elementary school, which you want in the middle of your neighborhood, right? It has an intensity that's maybe appropriate in neighborhood level, all the way to a public works shop, which has almost more kind of industrial nature to it, and it's more intense. And so we do try to explain that. There's language in the land use description part of it that talks through that a little bit, that talks about how you deal with the range of intensities that you can have within a civic use. I also want to talk a little bit about the housing master plan that was completed too. A big thank you again to all of our volunteers that helped on this subcommittee. They put in a number of meetings that helped guide this process. The housing strategy plan focuses more on policy and strategy related to achieving the mix of housing and price points that are identified within both the housing study, but also then the land use master plan. It provides some good context to housing unit need and what types, so the split that we should have, the gaps we should be filling, how do we address affordable and attainable options, how do we address some of the redevelopment and infrastructure approaches, and ultimately also some regulations that are missing or potentially in the way of achieving the goals that we have. We like to touch on a little bit about what the housing action strategy can do. So it really can be that blueprint for public policy and programs. It should be helping stimulate conversations. It's one of the reasons I really love doing housing studies, because it really does get people kind of in the room sometimes having these conversations together instead of kind of one-off and talking about where those synergies can be. It can show how we can for our builders and developers, where high demand for housing products can be within product types and price points specifically. Also, it can hopefully motivate our partners, employers, to get involved in those solutions. This gets back to the part that I love of the people getting together in the room and having these conversations. And then finally, it also can be a great tool for kind of educating residents and showing them the opportunities that we have. Couple items of note, the goals provide more specific direction than the AIM-Norman development principles, so they start to drill down a little bit. We have the 10 development principles and the goals in the housing study. We begin to drill down on that. They mesh the community input with the data analysis that was done and the housing forecast. And then each goal needs to be elaborated on through that framework of goal statement, and this may also include some metrics. Okay, so I want to run through the goals real quick and talk about some of the strategies. So their goal 1 was modernize development regulations to achieve consistency, efficiency, and outcomes. I would say that I talked a little bit at the beginning about common things we heard that people agreed upon, and I think modernizing the development regulations was maybe one of those. It was a consistent theme that we heard not only in the housing group, but kind of across broader strategies or broader conversations. So some of those strategies include rewriting the zoning and subdivision ordinances, coordinating with departments on the review with agreed upon administrative approval criteria, so how we move projects through the process. And then finally, what this kind of all begins, goal 2, is adding variety in housing types across more densities and design approaches. So some strategies here include creating accessible building plans, housing typologies, sharing specific types, share type-specific resources. So providing more resources on the types of housing, kind of, again, smoothing out that process. And offering kind of mixed use and redevelopment incentives. So where can we apply incentives in the types of projects that we want to achieve that's going to help achieve our goals specifically in that variety of housing. Goal 3, increase attainable, accessible, and quality housing options for all people. So some of the kind of strategies, first, the priority households here for this goal are low-income households, are mobility-limited households, supportive services, and those experiencing homelessness. And priority locations for thinking about where we're kind of needing and to focus these strategies, transit routes, active transportation routes, near schools and healthcare facilities. And I just want to pause for a second. A lot of times when in a housing study, when we start talking about priority locations, it's because some of the household's biggest expenses are housing and transportation and childcare. So when we can put housing that's closer to transit routes and active transportation, it just helps households kind of deal with overall budgets a little bit better. So that's how that strategy all kind of comes together. So more on the more specific side, enact target metric requirements for large developments, maintain an affordable housing development or trust fund, expand affordable housing education and advocacy to property owners too. Goal 4, enhance and promote the infill opportunities in existing neighborhoods. And some of our strategies here include increase rehabilitation and redevelopment incentives and programs on appropriate sites, build new and revamp public-private partnerships for neighborhood investments. And then finally, goal 5, have clear, understandable, and reasonable housing incentives and program procedures. So here, the idea is, the first one is develop a central curated resource center for property owners, renters, builders, and landlords to access resources. Expand our housing education and engagement, and simplify any incentives, funding, administrative approval, or other processes required for housing strategies. I'd also like to just pause here and say, especially in these strategies, these are great examples where the partnerships are really important. These might not be things that the cities take on solely, but they're a partner at the table in implementing some of these strategies. Now I'm going to hand it over for the transportation so you can hear somebody else. Thank you so much.
Before we get started, one commissioner has a comment to make.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for the interruption and request and transparency. I have a pretty bad migraine coming on, and I have prescription medication in my car 1 minute away, or 50 yards away. Can we take a small recess and go grab that? I don't know how that works.
Do we have to adjourn, or do I just call that? Beth, do we adjourn for that? Okay. All right. I will give us a 5-minute break.
Okay, apologies, thank you.
I'm going to call our meeting back into order. We do have a change in some of our order. We are still going to hear all items, but we had a request for the water to go next.
Thank you for the flexibility with that. Have a minor family injury to attend to. So, very happy to be speaking to you tonight about our water and wastewater master plans. My name is Cole Niblett. I'm the Oklahoma Water Team Leader for Garver and also a proud resident of East Norman. So happy to be speaking to you tonight. My goal is to be efficient and get through 2 master plans in 10, 15 minutes here or so. So let's dive right in. Everyone has given shout outs to their subcommittee, but just a brief comment here. You've seen their names, but I really wanted to comment on, again, that diversity of thought that our subcommittee had. We had a really cool blend of academia, industry, watershed management, previous municipality utility management experience. So really a great group to help us sharpen the sword and put together a really defensible plan with coming at it from several different angles with their experience. So can't say enough good things about them. Our water master plan is focused on bolstering water supply resources and then delivering that safe drinking water to the end user. So you're going to hear me talk mostly tonight about 2 key buckets. One, the water supply, where our water resources come from. Namely, today, the 3 water supplies that the City of Norman uses are Lake Thunderbird, groundwater from the Garber-Wellington Aquifer, and then treated wholesale water from the City of Oklahoma City. So that's our water supply sources. And then it's really the second bucket is that water distribution system. So taking those supplies, delivering them through a series of pipelines and water towers and infrastructure of that nature to deliver that product to the end user. And so your Norman distribution system today, it consists of miles of underground pipes and water storage facilities throughout the city. So showing you a literal 30,000-foot view of what this looks like for our city. You can see the blue lines representing all the different distribution lines we have in the system, our water storage tanks throughout the system, and the orange dots representing our well field in the northern and northeastern portions of Norman. So in this distribution system, performance under our current average and maximum day conditions today are generally good. So we're looking at things like delivery pressure, fire flow availability, things of that nature. And so showing you an example of that on the screen where we take hydraulic models, hydraulic modeling efforts, and produce maps like what you're seeing on the screen, where we look at all the available pressure availabilities throughout the system. And so in this map, green and blue, those are the good colors. That's what we want. Those represent distribution pressures above our targets of, say, 45 PSI throughout the system. That's what provides adequate pressure for washing, clothes, taking showers, things of that nature. In this graph, we don't want to see yellow, red nodes, and you can see here today under current conditions, we have very limited instances of that throughout Norman. So a big focus of our plan is maintaining that performance over the next 20 years as we add demands and as we add growth throughout the system. We go through a water demand procedure, and of course, those water demands are projected to increase proportionally with our service population. So showing you a water demand curve on the screen here, we have years across the horizontal axis, demand in million gallons per day in the left vertical axis, and with our corresponding service population on the right-hand axis. And so you can see the general trend historically in Norman has been relatively linear, and we're projecting a very similar increase over our 20-year planning horizon, ending in 2045 with an average water day demand around that 23 million gallons per day. As I mentioned, Lake Thunderbird is currently the largest source of supply, and that currently supplies about 70% of our water demands throughout the system. So you can see there Lake Thunderbird at 70%, groundwater following there at about a quarter, 24% or so, with that wholesale OKC connection balancing the remaining 7%. And this fluctuates throughout the year, right? This fluctuates from time to time as demands increase and decrease throughout the system, but on the average, this is generally the split we have in our water supply portfolio. And so when we look at that water demand projection compared to our available water supplies today, we run a gap analysis, and we do have a potential water supply gap of approximately 9 million gallons per day, MGD, in the next 20 years or by the next 20 years. And so you can see here as we look at water demands compared with our current water supplies, you can see that water supply gap that we have to provide over the planning horizon. And so filling that gap was a big part of this master plan. And so we went through a pretty robust alternatives evaluation, screened out many different alternatives that could potentially supply this water, and then developed 20-year life cycle costs for our shortlisted alternatives, which were deemed to be more feasible than the wholesale list of items that we looked at. And so you can see when we go through that evaluation, 20-year life cycle cost on the vertical axis there, and the three lowest alternatives being OKC wholesale purchases from the city of OKC, continuing to expand our well field with new wells in the Garber Wellington, and then eventually adding IPR, which is indirect potable reuse, so augmenting Lake Thunderbird with advanced treated reclaimed effluent from the water reclamation facility. So out of this exercise, those three alternatives shake out as the most cost effective over the next 20 years. And so when we put that together into a water supply portfolio in 20 years, you can see how we take that same pie chart that we looked at a few moments ago and how that changes potentially over the next 20 years. And so again, looking to really expand our finished water purchase from the city of Oklahoma City, increasing those purchase volumes and potentially adding a second connection with OKC, continuing to add those Garber Wellington wells that I talked about, growing that percentage of the pie chart, going from roughly 24% to 32%, and then filling the balance with that potable reuse portion that I mentioned, IPR, Lake Thunderbird augmentation, as well as our plan does discuss the potential for pivoting to direct potable reuse if necessary. That's a discussion in the report, and some considerations are laid out for that, and it's allowed for in this plan if that becomes more feasible in the future. And so when we put this all together in a 20-year CIP or capital improvement plan, we're showing a map here with roughly 12 to 13 different projects, key projects that come out of that CIP. And these are really focused on three primary areas. One, bolstering our existing water service area. So again, upsizing and maintaining the existing water service area to maintain those performance criteria we talked about. And then in the green, growing our infrastructure to serve future water service area improvements. And then finally, the blue being the supply improvements, bolstering those water supplies that we then feed into the distribution system. And with that, I think I'm good to roll right into wastewater. Is that right? Okay. So very similarly, kind of flip side of the coin here, our wastewater master plan focuses on two similar buckets, so to speak, on the wastewater side, namely the collection system and water reclamation. So again, the collection system being the pipelines, manholes, lift stations that collects that wastewater and conveys it to a single common location, where we reclaim that wastewater, treat it with the water reclamation facility before it can be discharged then back to the environment or reused for other beneficial uses. And so again, giving you a snapshot here of Norman's wastewater system, and that collection system again is miles and miles of gravity pipelines, force mains, and lift stations that all convey to a single water reclamation facility on the south side of town. You can see there in the purple triangle there on the southern end of town off of Jenkins. So again, you'll hear about drainage a bit more later tonight, but as some of you may be aware, there's a general watershed boundary running through the center of Norman, shown in that blue line there. And so generally speaking, everything on the south side of that line drains to the Canadian River. Everything on the north side of that line generally drains to Little River, Rock Creek, et cetera, to Lake Thunderbird eventually. And so that's a big part of our evaluation, is optimizing those sewer sheds, conveying that flow in a cost-effective way to, again, get it to those common locations for water reclamation. And so key areas for improvement within this existing collection system mainly include things like core trunk mains in our core service area. So as we continue to add more demands throughout the system, those demands consolidate in the core kind of arterial lines within our system. And so as an example, Bishop Creek, Imhoff Creek, as we get to the southern portions of Norman, that's where we consolidate a lot of our wastewater demand. And so keeping up those interceptors, upsizing those lines and that infrastructure to keep up with that demand is a big part of our master plan. So showing you a similar demand curve as the wastewater side, and again, our wastewater flows increase proportionally to that service population. And so again, wastewater flow in million gallons per day in the vertical axis, you can see that roughly linear trend over the next 20 years, ending at roughly 17 MGD, million gallons per day of average wastewater demand in the future, or in 2045 rather. A big piece of this is identifying if we continue to build out our existing water reclamation facility or if we consider building additional reclamation facilities. And so we considered several potential locations for new WRFs, but ultimately that existing WRF that we have today is recommended for the 20-year horizon. Simply put, the economy of scale, managing the asset that we already have, expanding that infrastructure is much more cost-effective over the next 20 years. And so you can see in the plan that's detailed as the recommendation for the next 20 years. And then again, as we look at the 20-year capital improvement plan for wastewater, again, we have a series of improvements targeted at bolstering that existing wastewater service area improvement, or that existing service area. Future eastern conveyance improvements, so as more demand is placed on the eastern side of Norman, 48th Avenue, locations like that, that infrastructure to service those areas is a big component of this plan, and again, consolidating that flow to the existing WRF. And then finally, existing WRF improvements, as we place more demand on that infrastructure, the improvements to keep up with that demand, keep up that infrastructure are detailed in the plan. And one thing that applies to both water and wastewater that I think is important to point out is our plan is based on demand triggers. So this 20-year CIP for both water and wastewater, it's built to where you make the improvements as the demand necessitates it. So if our projection is turning out to be more conservative than what the actual growth is realizing, these improvements can be delayed until those demands reach a certain trigger and the infrastructure is actually needed. So this plan is set up to be flexible so that Norman Utilities can react to the demand that they're seeing actually in the system as it occurs, not just based on a projection. So there's a little bit of check and balance there as far as when the infrastructure spending has to occur. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move back to, we can go to transportation or any other place we haven't hit yet.
There you are. Good to go. Thanks. Appreciate it. Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Brett Cabanis. I am a senior project manager in charge of municipal transportation here for Garber. I am a 38-year resident of Norman, and 25 of that is in Ward 5. So I've seen quite a bit of transportation improvements over that time frame, and I was very excited about the opportunity to work on this project for the next 20 years. Like everybody else that's going to present tonight, we want to give a shout out to our transportation subcommittee, a very well-diverse group. Chairman Adair did a very good job of keeping us focused on the plan at task, but I also want to say I really enjoyed working with city staff on this, and you see those folks as we go through here. There's quite a few of the city staff that helped put this plan together. So really the 25 comprehensive transportation plan is an update of your 2014 transportation plan. We did take the guiding principles, as you see here, from the 2014 and apply them going forward for the next 20 years. How this relates, the transportation relates to the other transportation plans is kind of unique because it does touch a lot of different elements. For instance, stormwater, transportation bridges, and green belts, things of that nature touch stormwater. Housing connects housing when people, active transportation to those things, parks, trails, and then obviously water and wastewater transportation corridors provide that public right-of-way for them to put their utilities through. So we really have an opportunity here to touch a lot of the different master plan updates as we went forward. A little bit of our scope of work was to take what happened, the document in 2014, apply what has happened up until today, as we call it, Norman today, and then what our plans, updates are going to be going forward in 2045. The obvious things with transportation master plans are roads, bridges, and traffic. Something that was unique to this is we also got the opportunity to add active transportation, parking and transit, and aviation, and include those master plans into the overall transportation master plan update. So we did look at several existing studies. Obviously, the 2014 comprehensive plan is where we started. We also looked at the ACOG, the Central Oklahoma Government's Encompass 2045 plan, take their guidance from that and try to make sure that our recommendations mirrored their recommendations as well. The Norman 21, Go Norman Transit Plan, which has recently been adopted and has been in use for a few years now. The RTA, Regional Transit Authority, and their commuter rail plan between Edmond, Oklahoma City, and Norman. We looked at that as well and incorporated some of those concepts into our plan. And then the Westheimer Airport Master Plan. Now, this one's a little unique because the University of Oklahoma owns the airport. And so it's their master plan. They're the ones who are responsible for implementing the airport master plan. However, anything what we call outside of that is what we looked at with the transportation master plan update. So we did do several workshops, as Amy mentioned earlier, and I think the two biggest things that we took away from public input here is safety, and it doesn't always mean vehicular safety, but more pedestrian safety than anything, and active transportation, trails, sidewalks, things of that nature. Those were probably the two biggest takeaways from the public meeting, and so that helped guide the subcommittee as we move forward during the update. So let's talk a little bit about some of the updates. We mentioned aviation and the airport master plan that the university has now approved by the Federal Aviation Administration. There are a couple of recommendations in here. One is what can we do to protect outside of the fence, outside the property of the airport itself. Some of the recommendations talk about adopting a formal height clearance standard for the approaches, as you see in the map here. Those are the runway approaches that we want to make sure that we protect that vertical distance above. There has been a state law that was enacted, but it is one that the city council will still need to adopt resolutions for, or a policy for that. We want to make sure we provide more transit opportunities and active transportation to that. If you start looking at the Aviation Academy that's going to be built out there, you know, how are we going to get students to that facility? And whether it's through additional bus routes, through trails, through sidewalks, streets as well. We want to make sure that we focus on that. And then we want to make sure that we keep the infrastructure going out from the airport to the highways in good working order, such as Robinson Street Flood and Tecumseh, so they can connect to I-35 as well. The parking recommendation, this is from a study that was done by Kimley and Horn back in 2018, and it was a joint effort between the county and the city on how to address parking. Specifically in downtown Norman. That plan has been adopted by the city in the past. We didn't see any reason to change any of that, so we want to continue to push that one forward, but we also want to work closely with the University of Oklahoma with any of their future developments, particularly pertaining to Campus Corner area. We want to look at parking enforcement. We want to look at new technology on how to meter those parking spaces as well. And then we want to make sure that we work with the county going forward on who's going to manage all of that infrastructure going forward. And then the transit plan, again, we mentioned that it is really very recent. There are some things that have been implemented since that point in time. One of the biggest one is the transfer center downtown. And we want to make sure that we start connecting some of those other regional transit opportunities. Let's say the RTA stop at the depot. We want to make sure that we have trails and sidewalks, active transportation between there and the transit facility. and start connecting some of those with the parking facilities in downtown and make sure that all of them really kind of integrate together with that. This is a document that's updated annually and looked at with bus routes, so we want to continue to support that as we go forward with the 2045 plan. The bridge plan, this is something that really we adopted the 2023 bridge bond program. It has just recently been, implemented. We saw no need to change that. Staff did a wonderful job in identifying all of the bridges in the city of Norman, which is near 90 structures. The picture that you see here is 60th Avenue Northeast. That bridge was one of the very first ones on the bridge bond program to be designed and then constructed, and it was just open, I believe, last week. So we want to continue to reinforce all of our routine inspections on that, update that staff list of priority projects as it goes forward. And those bridges are inspected every 2 years on a cycle throughout the city. So we want to continue that program and move it forward. And I think we will see great success with that in the very near future. Traffic, again, when we think traffic, we think about congestion, and we also think about safety. The traffic recommendation here is to implement and utilize the regional safety action plan that ACOG has developed for the area. Continue to research and chase after grants to fund things like Safe Routes to School, which is one of the bigger policy adoptions that we're going to recommend that the City of Norman continue to follow. And then develop also a roundabout policy for intersection improvements. One of the tasks that we were asked to do with the transportation plan update is provide city staff with a tool, a spreadsheet that analyzes intersections from a conventional four-way intersection into how would that look as a roundabout, and how would it function. And that gives city staff a better tool moving forward on when they get that request on if they want to have a signalized intersection or would a roundabout be a more safe and cost-effective solution for intersection improvements. We would be a little bit remiss if we at least didn't touch in the master plan update on what the remaining transportation bond program projects are left. And you see here the projects in green are the ones that are still in design, blue are the ones that are planned, and the yellow are the ones under construction. And so you see there has been some delays in bidding some of these projects, and that's primarily due to federal funding changes. When the 2014 bond program was was adopted, there was a different set of criteria for federal funding for projects. That has changed in the last 10 years, and it's fixing to change again, we believe, going forward as well. But the city is still fully committed on getting these projects completed that were listed on that bond program. Now, transportation obviously goes hand in hand with the land use plan. We need to make sure that we are connecting those developments with safe routes, whether they be roadways, active transportation, trails, greenways, things of that nature. So we did want to make sure that we worked hand in hand with the land use plan to make sure our transportation plan dovetailed nicely with that. Active transportation, again, this was the number one thing is the comments that we heard from the public is, we need more active transportation. We need safe active transportation. We say that active transportation could be a on-street bike path or a bike lane. It could be sidewalks. It could be side paths. It could be green belts used for active transportation and recreational. One of the comments or several of the comments is we need to have around our city a trail system. And so this is one of the biggest things I think the subcommittee put forth is to have a very robust system as you see here. And you see that we have connection points leading out of the city that lead to other cities and other communities who have trail plans. And so, the opportunity to get on from downtown Norman, a trail, and go all the way up to Moore without getting on a street is very appealing to a lot of our citizenry. The other one that you see here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the next slide or two, is East Alameda Street, and being able to go from downtown Norman or for the university, again, being able to safely bike, walk, and get out to one of Norman's biggest assets for recreational, and that's Lake Thunderbird. Now, there obviously is a trail system being implemented along Highway 9, but just think that is a high-speed facility with a lot of traffic. Alameda, lower speeds, less traffic, much more safe for the pedestrians moving forward. And then we did a roadway plan update, and really this supports the land use again, but it really addresses safety. It's consistent with the ACOG Regional Transportation Plan, the 2045 plan, and it also has the input back from the public about where are some of our problem spots, whether they are congestion, whether they are unsafe intersections that have a high accident rate as well. And then again, you see most of the new network is moving to the east and to the north. And what you see also is collector roads within the section lines. And the intent there is to provide some connectivity between neighborhoods without getting onto a section line road, to provide that little bit safer element going forward for the traveling public. One of the other big things in the subcommittee, I was very, very pleased with their direction on this, is a special use corridor, and that's for East Alameda. I mentioned a little bit about the trail system going forward. East Alameda, if you think about high-speed facility, Highway 9 to the south, potential turnpikes to the north, another high-speed facility for vehiculars, unsafe for pedestrians. East Norman needs a safe, pedestrian-friendly, slower, less volume roadway to get to downtown and to the east side of town. And so the committee had a concept of, what can we do to improve safety? We improved the intersection safety as well going forward. And what we came up with is a special use corridor that really kind of is still a principal arterial, but it's a combination between an urban and a rural section here. So if you see in the graphic here, we have one lane travel direction or one lane in each travel direction, but we've added shoulders for the vehicular safety. We added a raised median that could be landscaped to prevent head-on collisions in that area. But then on the outside of the right-of-way there, you see 12-foot side paths on both sides of the road. And so that provides safety for the bikes, that provides safety for the pedestrians as well. That's set away from traffic going forward. Also, we improved the intersections, or we suggest improving the intersections at the rural areas, because of those are stop controlled for the north-south. Alameda is not stopped. It is full go through those intersections. So, roundabouts may be the opportunity there to help slow down traffic again, make safer intersection improvements going forward. There are some lane added for capacity in the plan going forward, but that will be driven, much like Cole said, as time goes by and there's more of a demand, the roadway improvements will be ahead or right on that curve with them. So as we see that demand starting to develop, that's when the road network will then be implemented going forward. So some of the projects that we've highlighted here, we needed a north side thoroughfare How do we get across I-35 on the north side of town? Franklin Road becomes that principal urban arterial through there. One of the other challenges is we had to get active transportation across I-35 on the north side of town. ODOT, in working with them and through their planning folks, has a new overpass at Franklin Road identified in the future. And when that happens, that will be the vehicle that will allow us to have an active transportation trail across the interstate on the north end of town. We already have that at Rock Creek, and then we also have that at Lindsay Street as well. So this would be kind of that north end of the active transportation plan. We mentioned East Alameda, and then we also mentioned 48th Avenue East. As development moves out that way, ACOG had already identified 48th Avenue East as being a major north-south corridor for East Norman. It had stopped at Franklin Road. We want to take it all the way up to Indian Hills, and then we also want to extend it south to the south boundary of Norman. And so now that becomes a potential primary arterial for north-south traffic for folks on the east side of town that don't have to go all the way over to Flood, don't have to go all the way to Porter, don't have to go all the way over to I-35. Now there was a comment made, we do show the turnpikes as they are shown today on Access Oklahoma's website. This was a decision made by the subcommittee and voted on by the subcommittee. It's not that we support the turnpikes, and even in our document we talk about, this is Norman's transportation plan. It's not anything to do or response to the Turnpike and Turnpike Authority and their future plans. But we felt remiss if we didn't at least show that on our plans going forward. Again, as their plans change, this is a living, breathing document that can be updated at any point in time going forward with that. With that, who's next? Stormwater?
All right, we're gonna end with the fun stuff. Stormwater and parks. Can't get any more fun than that. My name is Alan Dennis. It's great to be here. Thank you all commissioners for being here. Looking forward to talking to you guys about stormwater tonight. I've been in Norman for right at 13 years. We moved here 13 years ago this week. We came here with no kids, and now we have 3 kids that play in the creeks and the stormwater, and so we interact with stormwater on a daily basis. And I was really excited to be able to be a part of this this process. It's been really, really great seeing the way that Norman appreciates stormwater. I do want to recognize our subcommittee. Amanda Nairn was our subcommittee chair, and if you guys don't know her, she is an amazing asset to this city. She is a wonderful citizen and involved citizen, and she was an excellent leader of the subcommittee. We have people coming from all different perspectives that all interact with stormwater policy on a daily basis, from stormwater quality policy for the state level to engineers, civil engineers, and developers. There were all those perspectives were on our subcommittee. And of course, Stormwater City staff was excellent as well. Really enjoyed working with Scott, Jason, and Michelle to understand what the stormwater challenges are in Norman today, and then moving forward into the future, what we can do about that. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of definition of what is stormwater. The biggest thing to understand about stormwater in Norman is that there's a ridge line moving through the city that Cole mentioned earlier that divides the Canadian River watershed, which is the more urbanized, the more constrained flow paths through the city. You got your Imhoff Creek, Bishop Creek, Brookhaven Creek, and then on the other side of that ridge line, everything flows to the Lake Thunderbird, which is really, there's different priorities in each of those watersheds. So in the Lake Thunderbird watershed, you have runoff water quality, preservation of that as the big priority, as well as maintaining our natural areas. We're going to get into what all these orange lines are on the screen are here in a little bit, but that's really important to preserve those natural areas. And in the Canadian River watershed, reducing those flood and erosion damages that are constantly occurring due to impervious area and just constrained and aging infrastructure. So maintaining that aging infrastructure in the Canadian River is extremely important. So, you know, keeping on with what is the definition of stormwater, a lot of things we think about, you may recognize this building. This is right outside here. This is during the rain event in October of last year. Stormwater includes detention ponds. It includes infrastructure that conveys water from one place to another, inlets, culverts, bridges, things like that. But it also includes stormwater quality. And so that was something that we really focused on throughout this, and that was really based on some input from our citizens. And so during those neighborhood workshops, we discovered that the citizens' priority in Norman for stormwater is really primarily on ecological improvement and public safety. And really, when you start talking to people about public safety, it's really about that stormwater quality, that water quality, especially as it moves towards Lake Thunderbird. And so we really wanted to put a big emphasis on what are the policies that we can implement that have been recommended in the past, or that are new policies that will prioritize that stormwater quality, as well as those other priorities that we mentioned before. So, you know, we all know that we have, you know, on weeks like this, we can see the flooding issues that we have, the erosion issues that we have, but also making sure that that stormwater quality is a focus as well. So this is an update, kind of like what Brett mentioned. This is not a complete rewrite of the Stormwater Master Plan. So the purpose of this update is really tuning that piano from 2009. This was, in the 2009 Master Plan, was a really, really well done document. There was a lot of things that were really well thought out in that document, and we kind of viewed this as tuning that piano. So we didn't want to remake the piano, we just want to make it sound up to date and new. We also wanted to understand that public sentiment about stormwater priorities that I just mentioned, and identify potential policy changes that are needed with these proposed land use changes. As the land use is evolving throughout Norman, we want to be able to keep up with that and make sure that we are protecting those priorities in Norman appropriately. And then we wanted to update the goals of the Stormwater Master Plan, and we'll get to that as well. So one of the things that was identified in 2009 was these stream planning corridors, or water quality protection zones. So all of the areas identified in orange are stream planning corridors that have been delineated as the full build-out 100-year floodplain of Norman, of the Lake Thunderbird watershed only, actually. And so in 2011, City Council adopted the Water Quality Protection Zone Ordinance. And so now, as properties are platted, these stream planning corridors are converted to a water quality protection zone, which really maintains that natural riparian zone that helps filter water as it moves towards Lake Thunderbird. It helps preserve those natural areas. It really is a huge part of addressing that priority and those priorities of the Lake Thunderbird watershed. So we want to make sure that that's emphasized and maintained moving forward, and even bolstered up a little bit. We'll get to that in a little bit. We also wanted to emphasize that there have been several capital projects that have been addressed since 2009. Those stars on the map here represent projects that were identified in 2009 that have been completed. The biggest one that people remember is Lake McGee. If you've been here for a long time, you remember floodwaters would just pond there and stay there for several days. And the capital projects list that was developed in 2009 identified this one, and it was constructed several years ago. And just wanted to highlight some of that success story there. Sorry about that. Another thing that happened in 2023 is updating the engineering design criteria. This implemented several stormwater, kind of bringing the stormwater design criteria up to modern day, kind of moving out of the 1980s criteria, moving it into something that is representing the current science with precipitation estimates and things like that. And we also want to recommend that this is looked at again every couple of years to make sure that the design criteria is keeping up with science. Another thing that was added in 2003 was section 7000 of the engineering design criteria, and that really focuses on that sustainable stormwater development and sustainable stormwater design. And so focusing on that stormwater quality, maintaining stormwater quality throughout the city. And there has also been a really major focus on cooperation and education of stormwater. Michelle Loudenbach's team, the Doers, have done 116 events from 2021 to 2025 to really educate the public on, what is stormwater, the things that we just went through at the beginning of this, and really helping people understand that it's not just, every time it rains, it floods. It's also the stormwater quality throughout our city and how important that is to our city. And so now we want to move into what is left to do. What was identified in 2009 that has not been completed? The yellow dots on this screen are the capital projects that were identified through that 2009 master plan that have not been constructed yet. And so a lot of that is due to funding, the lack of funding for stormwater projects in Norman. Right now, a lot of projects are either funded through disaster relief grants or just general budget being saved up throughout the years. And the stormwater team has done a really great job addressing what they can with the budget they have. But there really does need to be a focus on finding that alternative funding, whether that's a stormwater utility or general obligation bond for stormwater specifically. And then also, like Brett mentioned, adding stormwater improvements to other projects throughout the city, whether that's transportation projects or parks, the bridges that are going on now, the bridge bond. That's a really important source of alternative funding as well. And so now we'll move into what is left to do in 2025, or what is new for 2025. So we did update the goals for the Stormwater Master Plan. I'll kind of run through these a little bit. The first goal was focused on water quality. So protect the runoff water quality contributing to Lake Thunderbird and the Canadian River to preserve the natural and beneficial uses of these water bodies. Then moving on to flood risk, providing an understanding of the flood risk to citizens in our community and continuing to implement and enhance the capital improvement program to help reduce flooding risks. That's something I should have mentioned is we took that capital improvement plan, all those projects that were identified in 2009, all the ones that had not been completed yet, we updated the cost estimate for that based on the inflation that's happened over the past few years, as well as new understanding of what it will take to construct those projects. We updated those costs, and we also reevaluated the evaluation criteria matrix for those projects and made it something more objective that can be evaluated based on GIS processes. And so we really want to help that capital improvements program be something that's useful for the city and in prioritizing those projects. And that kind of addresses the flood risk in the center part of town. Also, moving on to ecology, enhancing and preserving the ecological character of the unurbanized areas of Norman. That goes back to the water quality protection zones and the stream planting corridors. And the same thing with riparian areas, restoring or rehabilitating the riparian areas in the urbanized area of Norman while expanding recreational access and opportunities that support ecological health of these areas. So working with the parks plan to make sure that parks are located in places where you can provide some of that floodplain storage. That's a dual purpose park and stormwater facility. Going back to education, continuing to prioritize the community awareness and education regarding flood risk, stormwater quality, city infrastructure, and individual responsibilities to preserve and maintain both the natural and man-made stormwater resources. And then moving on to the stormwater CIP projects, prioritizing those stormwater projects using a transparent process, like I mentioned, that includes collaboration with all stakeholders. So those are our new goals that were developed as part of this master planning process. Moving on into our key recommendations. So there's a fairly extensive list of recommendations that go beyond just this, but I did want to highlight some of these key recommendations that we developed. First one was requiring a runoff quality volume treatment in the new development. So right now, a runoff quality treatment was something that was mentioned and recommended in the 2009 master plan. It was also mentioned in the 2023 engineering design criteria update, but it is not currently required throughout Norman. It is recommended in that design criteria, but we are recommending that becomes something that is required for all new developments to treat that first flush of rainfall so that the oils and the things that are accumulating on the ground are not going directly into our streams. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But also preventing a reduction of the WQPZ or the stream planting corridor widths in our 2045 reserve. You heard Amy talk about where that kind of is in the city. And so we want to make sure that we maintain those natural areas, those riparian areas that are serving as a natural filter for the stormwater as it moves towards Lake Thunderbird by preventing a reduction of those WQPZ widths, which is an option right now depending on different things that developers can do in that area. Oh, sorry. So also installing additional water quality monitoring stations. And so right now we have a total maximum daily load program in the city that kind of monitors water quality, especially moving towards Lake Thunderbird. We would recommend installing a few more of those to identify where future development, future major transportation projects could potentially change that water quality. We want to establish a baseline today through additional monitoring locations. We also recommended creating an incentive program for projects that exceed the stormwater management requirements. So there are certain minimum stormwater management requirements for our what's called the MS4 program, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And so if a development is able to exceed those minimum requirements, we recommend creating an incentive system that also ties back to that stormwater utility, that funding recommendation as well. And also, as I mentioned before, regularly updating that engineering design criteria to keep up with science and keep up with the precipitation estimates as they change throughout the future. And also, there's all kinds of other things. That's just like one example of the things that can change. And lastly, encouraging low-impact development, or LID, when accessory structures are permitted. So in our core part of town, in the Canadian River watershed, we already have problems all over the place. You saw most of those yellow dots are within the Canadian River watershed. And as we add accessory structures, we are adding impervious area that could potentially exacerbate problems that we already have. And so recommending these low-impact development strategies through the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, when these accessory structures are permitted, we recommend the use of rain barrels or some of these small-scale low-impact development strategies that can help reduce that major flush into the system. So going back to the stormwater quality treatment recommendation, this is what we have developed for the city. There's basically 3 different zones of levels or volumes of water quality treatment that are required. Zone 1 would be the most intensive, and so that would treat the first 1.5 inches of rainfall. That volume that has to be treated is calculated based on the first 1.5 inches of rainfall, and that's within the 2045 reserve and east. So as we move closer to Lake Thunderbird, requiring more treatment of that water, but that also moves up into the major tributaries to Lake Thunderbird. We have Little River on the north part of the town, Rock Creek, and then Dave Blue Creek down at the bottom and its tributary. And so we have a 1,000-foot buffer from each of those streams where that 1.5 inches would be required. And then another 1,000-foot buffer off of that would be Zone 2, where 1 inch of water quality volume treatment is required for discharges into that area. And then in Zone 3, which is the rest of Norman, just a half of an inch of water quality treatment. So this is sort of understanding that this would be a brand new requirement for Norman, and we want to not make it too onerous to be able to develop. We need more development in these areas that are being identified as future low urban or medium urban areas throughout the east part of Norman, but requiring some amount of water quality treatment and making that a little bit more intensive treatment as you move closer to those streams that really impact the lake more directly. So with that, that's our new recommendations that have gone into this Stormwater Master Plan update. And we've already gone through water and wastewater, so I guess we'll go on to parks. I appreciate your guys' attention today. Oops, there we go.
Thanks. Okay, sorry, you got me back. I would say that if you've seen Molly present this from RDG, who helped lead this, she has a lot more energy. Maybe that's what she needed right now. But this is the last one, and we'll kind of move through this quickly. But you saved the best for last, right? Parks are always the best part of our communities frequently. Big shout out again to the subcommittee that worked on this, and for our subcommittee chair who helped navigate this process. Really appreciated all their help and input. So features of the parks plan include a recreation program analysis, facility analysis, marketing and branding. Actually ended up getting pulled into this a little bit too. Goal setting, and then finding the synergies with other planning efforts and developing our long-term plan out of all of these pieces. I don't think this was something that was kind of envisioned at the beginning of the process, but as the group began working together, they realized that maybe refining the department's mission statement was a good idea. And so through several meetings and conversations, got to the point of identifying the new mission statement of our mission is to provide the community of Norman with safe, inclusive, and accessible parks, recreation, and cultural experiences that enhance the quality of life for residents of all ages. So that kind of became their kind of guiding principle, I guess, in a way. The goals that were identified in the plan, and these tied pretty closely to, they kind of worked through these as it related to the development principles. Optimizing efficiencies in the department operations, supporting and enabling the development of diverse housing options that retain high quality living. So when we think about high quality neighborhoods, it's the housing, the parks, and all of those things that make up quality neighborhoods. Improving the attractiveness of neighborhoods and the living spaces, as well as improving the environmental resiliency. Having equitable distribution and connectivity of our parkland within the community, so making sure all residents have good access to our parks. Creating a robust and strategic system of parks, natural lands, urban forests, and trails to contribute to the economic value of our private residences, businesses, and the public spaces. Addressing how the community is connected programmatically, not just through the physical infrastructure, but those programs and that our parks department puts on. Designing public spaces thoughtfully with integration of accessible features, signage, and lighting strategies. Working to drive neighborhood impacts through park access and connectivity, healthy green spaces, modern design and equipment, and community gathering spaces. Making sure parks will reflect smart growth and government, integrating how development decisions connect with parks and programming. And then finally, leverage city resources through creative and equitable partnerships that are transparent and collaborative. So those are tied pretty closely to those 10 development principles. Out of those goals, though, there were several community priorities that were identified. Comprehensive trails network, prioritizing our outstanding goals from the previous plan, from the 2009 master plan, protecting our Lake Thunderbird and stormwater management, being effective there, supporting and elevating the arts and culture within Norman, updating and modernizing policies that support the Parks and Recreation Department, and then finally maintaining that well-rounded and diverse array of programs in the community. So I just want to highlight a few of these community priorities. Starting with the Comprehensive Trails Master Plan, I think this was the most common feedback received from the community in the process for this. Brett mentioned it too in the transportation piece. It frequently came up. With regards to prioritizing our outstanding goals, some things that were specifically highlighted were more splash and spray grounds, building a new recreation center, Ruby Grant Park as a possible site, rebuilding or renovating and expand the 12th Avenue Recreation Center, rebuild or renovate or expand the Little Axe Community Center, developing a community park in the southwest portion of Norman, and then finally continuing planned upgrades in Griffin, Reeves, and Westwood Park. So those were some of the priorities from the previous master plan that folks felt needed to be carried forward. On updating and modernizing policies, few here to note. The park development fee, which was last updated in 1994. I think I joked that I think we have employees that were born after that. I know we do. Changing the cost structure for the park development fee from a flat fee to a cost per square foot model. Reviewing and revising parkland dedication ordinance, which was last updated in 1976. And then exploring and implementing our commercial development impact fee to support beautification and trail maintenance, and finally analyzing and reclassifying as needed parks in Norman's park system. With regards to the community priority for that well-rounded, diverse array of programs, potential areas for programming that were identified for growth, at least in some of those programs: adult programs and fitness, outdoor recreation and environmental education, community gardens and kind of unprogrammed spaces, additional special and community events, teen and tween programs, affordable childcare, outdoor adventure and family programs, and finally, adaptive programs. So that's the last of the master plans. Again, big thank you to everybody, the hundreds of hours, probably thousands of hours that were spent by folks to get us to here to this point. And we really appreciate everybody's time and attention. We know that was a lot of material to go through. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I will move to any questions of our presenters by commissioners. Go ahead.
I had just one clarification question on the transportation plan. On the planned transportation bond projects, there was a note of in design versus planned. What's the distinction there?
In design and still planned, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Or, sorry, it was in design. Yeah, it noted different projects that said one, like some said in design and then others said planned.
Okay.
What's the distinction?
The distinction is the ones that were green, are in design, have consultants selected and are actively working on the design right now. The ones planned don't have designers identified or selected at this point in time. Okay.
1 second.
Thanks. So I had a question. In looking over the document, on the Alameda project, anywhere that either Roundabout or Alameda are mentioned, they are not mentioned together, but in your presentation, they were. Is there an intent to have roundabouts along Alameda?
Included in there, yes. The intent is there. When we say intersection improvements, and again, we go back to the document that we provide staff to analyze intersection improvements. We feel that several of those are going to be roundabouts, based on speed, based on accident history, right-of-way constraints, things of that nature. We envision that they're going to be roundabouts in that corridor.
Okay, and also as a concerned Ward 5 citizen asking questions, not just as a planning commissioner, what is the plan intent on speed? Because speed reduction was mentioned in both this presentation and the other one.
We don't envision speed reduction being a key thing on Alameda. It's currently, I think, at 45.
It's 50.
In 50. Adding the median and having that physical barrier intunes drivers to slow down a little bit through there. Obviously, if the traffic management folks want to see that reduced through there, we would. The good thing is we've gotten pedestrians and bikes off of Alameda. Just last night, I followed 30 bikers going out through there 15 miles an hour for more than a mile. We can get them off the road. That provides them a safe passage as well. But speed is something that needs to be looked at probably on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And just comments on that. And looking at traffic flow, yes, getting to the destination of Lake Thunderbird is important. We want to encourage people, not just in Norman, but the surrounding areas to come out. But roads do go both ways. And so also just keep in mind what those citizens living in Ward 5 that would be coming the other direction on the road, what impact that might have on them as far as getting into the city for doctor's appointments, emergency health, those kind of things.
Yeah.
With roundabouts and whatnot.
And as a Ward 5 user of Alameda quite a bit, we want to see those have safe access to that roadway to get back into town. Again, adding of shoulders is a very simple thing, but it's very high safety impact improvement going that way as well.
Yes, no, fully support the shoulders, love the graphics of the streets, the roundabout. When I went back through, it just says east side. You know, Ward 5 loves transparency. So if the intent is to have roundabouts in Alameda, I would suggest that that verbiage be in the document very clearly.
Sure, and again, it is a draft. It
Yes.
hasn't been approved, so any suggestions, I feel comfortable in making those changes.
And then the other thing, not about roundabouts, but also in transportation. So the transportation document is separate than the land use document. And in the land use document, where the proposed OTA turnpikes are, there is a disclaimer. The first point that there's a map. However, in the transportation document, there is not. And so I would suggest that the size of the map on page 40 and also page 113 in transportation be reduced to put that same disclaimer that was on page, let me see, page 41 of the land use, to be above or below figure 411 on page 30 and above or below the figure on page 113.
Okay.
There's a lot of other figures.
Yes.
But page 113 is really concerning just because it says recommended, project recommendations east side, and it pictures it without a disclaimer. And I just think it would be really important to have that disclaimer. The first place where that map is, and then on that second map on 113, simply because it says recommended projects.
Okay, yeah, and for the rest of the commissioners and audience, there is a chapter in the land use document that addresses transportation, and one of those comments that you're talking about, that disclaimer, is the transportation master plan was about Norman. It's not about the OTA. It is about Norman and our transportation network and how that's going to be carried forward in 2045. Your comments are very spot on. We'll be happy to make those changes.
Thank you.
While we have our transportation specialist up here, if we could also have commissioners make any additional transportation questions now or comments relating to those matters. One sec.
Alameda Street thing, sorry. Do you know what the statutory right-of-way is on Alameda Street right now?
It varies. The closer you get into town, it's going to that 100-foot right-of-way, but farther east, it gets to the 33-foot statutory.
Yeah.
It was a state highway at one point in time, but like all transportation improvement plans, the city requests that there's an additional 13 feet on each side, or excuse me, 17 feet on each side. That would make it 50 foot on the north side, 50 foot on the south side. Now you have your 100-foot corridor for a principal arterial.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had considered, I saw the typical for the thing, and there's, there's lots of sheer cliffs and different things out there, and I didn't know if we already had the 100-foot or not. So it's just
A planning document right now.
some fun stuff to look forward to.
Very challenging.
I have some questions relating to alleys, which will kind of go directly to the transportation plan and then also in the land use plan. So a challenge that many residents and property owners in the core area have had is alleys not fitting within a classic definition. Alleys are not defined in these documents either. In the land use document, there's multiple places that refer to the need for alleys to be activated. Activated alleys is a primary goal in there, that parking be achieved from access off of the alleys, and that they provide screening from vehicles from the right-of-way. So to that extent, we are making alleys an integral part of our land use plan, but I don't know that I saw a high amount of attention. There was some discussion in the document regarding, I believe it was an alley north of Main Street and a bike transition, like a bike lane use for that. But can you maybe talk a little bit of how you think alleys fit within this transportation plan specifically?
It's a very good question, and I'll let Amy maybe address a little bit more about the land use component with that. Alleys typically aren't, they're separate from roadway networks, even though they do tie to a roadway network, just because of funding and how they're paid for and how they are constructed and when they are constructed. David Riesling may have a better answer than that. But we did not take alleys into consideration as far as a transportation update. And so we did not really include that with any of our discussions. Mainly we focused on active transportation, trails, sidewalks, pedestrian safety adjacent to streets.
Thank you. And so I don't want to necessarily hold up these plan documents related to this discussion, but maybe an over-occurring theme is that alleys just keep not getting addressed in a very specific way. They don't really have a good place within our system to get more attention and improvements to be able to achieve some of these other goals, like stormwater management and some of these other things that they could be utilized for. So I know there could be a bond, there could be other things, but just continuing to bring up that these alleys are not coming up in some of these documents where they could also be addressed. And we do still need to find ways to incorporate them and to be utilizing them to the maximum ability, since they are there and they do exist, to achieve some of these other land use goals.
Very good point. And we can get with Amy on the land use and see where we need to incorporate some of those comments.
Is it the downtown alley cycle?
Yes, did not reference that one. I didn't write down the page numbers on
Okay.
that one.
It's on the active transportation project recommendations, which is page 111, and it lists 4 different alley cycle track improvements. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, that's the only place that I saw the alleys
Yes.
kind of coming up
Yeah,
in the
when you do
transportation.
Control F to find alley, that is there in one other page, and it's not a
Not anywhere
definition
else.
or
Okay. Yeah.
or any meat to it. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
And so that's the only times the word alley appears in the transportation plan. I'd like to see maybe a little bit more attention in there, even if it's not at this juncture, at our regular living document update review process. In some other way, at some point, we really need to be looking at these alleys in a more meaningful way.
Okay. Yeah.
Are there any other questions or for commissioners on transportation items? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are any other questions on any other items that we want to move to? I have a couple. We brought this up at the last meeting, but this is maybe a little bit of pedantry, but there were a few just small language revisions that I'd like to propose for consideration. So one of them and this is all in the urban land use plan. One that we specifically saw was on, I'll give you page numbers here. Page 46. That was our classic neighborhood areas. It is just in a description of what we describe the challenges as, and it's a very small change, but it's described as having poor active transportation access, and just as a small language revision, changing the word poor to limited. And some of these in the same regard also on page 48 in the suburban neighborhood area, the character and intent, they describe existing but largely inconvenient public transportation, transit access. Again, changing that word to limited, just not describing our town maybe with quite as much negative language. So it did look like that would be an easy swap. I did mention that to staff. Staff, again, like always, is fantastic about dressing items in advance, so thank you for the staff members that helped reach out to me and discuss items, but those would be two small changes that I think could just add to a more positive tone to those two items. And there was also one other small item, which was on page 35. This is in the top box here, 3 important points about the maps. I'm going to read this item. Property owners decide is item number 1. The land use map depicts land uses for privately owned properties. The transition from their current use to the depicted use is expected to occur slowly in response to market demands as property owners voluntarily sell, develop, or change the use of their land. My suggestion is to strike the word sell from here because the change of ownership in itself does not change these requirements. Selling your property would not cause a change in there. How a new owner chose to change it, different from the grandfathering clause, would be what would change that. So rather than adding a bulky language of grandfathered allowances in there, striking the word sell from that because selling your property did not change anything. Your grandfathered uses are still grandfathered, and just making that clear for consistency. Then the last item I have is regarding the civic uses and so the intensity map on there. The way that civic is defined is incredibly broad. So this includes school educational uses, churches, anything kind of quasi-institutional, public, private items on here. So in relation to that, we have on pages 158 and 159, we have an intensity scale. Civic, you'll note, is across the entirety range of the intensity scale because an amphitheater is, one type of intensity, and, just like a small neighborhood church is one type of intensity versus a very large church with a very large parking lot being an entirely different intensity. A school versus a prison would both be civic uses at entirely different intensities. So that's addressed in there by putting that on all intensities, but then there is a compatibility matrix that describes how compatible civic use is with all other uses. In that compatibility matrix, civic is noted as number 5 as being most compatible with all other uses. So from here, this being the land use plan, we will have more specific, smaller zoning regulation changes that will give us different intensities within this civic designation. So I recognize that, but I want to be very clear that I do not think all civic uses are highly compatible in all areas. These are really things that are intended to be more special use, case-by-case approvals. As of right now, one thing that does put me a little bit at ease on this is that the only items that are currently zoned into this civic use are the ones that are already actively a civic use. So in order to change to a civic use in the future, for example, to add a church to a neighborhood, you would have to change your land use mapping out of whatever it was to that civic use. Now, there are allowances within zoning in which churches can fit within other types of codes and things in there too. I just want to be abundantly clear, I don't think that that compatibility matrix gives the right impression of all civic uses. I would rather see dashes across that particular line item rather than the number 5, but I, again, don't want to hold up the whole document for that item, but I just want to be very clear about my thoughts on that civic use. So I'm open to some commissioner discussion as to how we address that, if we do address that, and being very thoughtful about that as we are looking at zoning changes that come through of what fits within those civic uses and making sure we are still creating true compatibility within the wide variety that civic can allow. So, yes. Any discussion if there was, for example, an amendment on any of those items?
Question. If we can ask that.
Go for it.
So one of the things that I've always thought about with stormwater is in Norman, offhand, do you know what the design year is for a bridge?
Yes, very familiar with that. We just worked on the design for the Porter Bridge, and so with the 2023 engineering design criteria, the 100-year flood has to pass within 1 foot of the low core of the bridge.
Okay. Do you offhand know, and I'm not trying to walk you into anything, what the design year is for an interstate bridge for ODOT?
It's 50-year for interstate bridge.
It's interesting, isn't it? So my question is, and something to add to this that maybe we should think about, is how much are we over-designing bridges in Norman to pass 100-year plus 1 foot that we're spending money on that is gonna be engaged when 50 years is good for an interstate? So that's just something I've been kicking around, and so maybe that's something that we can look at zones, of certain zones. I think it was 2021 or something, we had a lot of flooding. FEMA gave us a lot of money, and then we ended up over-designing a lot of culverts out in East Norman, that if you drive out like 120th Avenue, for instance, it does this because the culverts are way over-designed, but that's what we had to do. So I would just encourage maybe looking at that and improving that piece of it.
Yeah, I don't want to speak too much about the design criteria for the transportation folks, but, you know, designing something for the 100-year storm could be a challenge in an urban area. You know, if you're trying to design a bridge that currently only passes the 10-year, like we're going to have this issue all up and down Emhoff.
Right.
If it only passes the 5 or 10-year today, and then you have to design it to pass the 100-year, you're possibly creating problems for people upstream and downstream.
Right.
And so that's something we always look at as engineers when in the conceptual stage. And that's something we work with the city staff to kind of, you know, maybe we have to get a variance for design criteria for this specific instance. And that's usually an option. It's always open for discussion. But
one of the things ODOT design criteria also looks at is functional classification of the roadway. You mentioned interstates, that obviously having the highest hierarchy of transportation needs to pass the larger storms. The smaller storms, as you work your way down to state highways and rural highways and things of that nature, the design criteria does change.
Right.
It may go down to only have to pass the 25-year rainfall event going forward. You could also look at something like that here in Norman, principal arterials, down to your collector roads, down to your urban streets as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see that implemented. And maybe not through this process, but something to talk about.
Very good point.
another thing that I might mention is that if you design a bridge in a new area for the 100-year storm, if you're designing a brand new bridge, you're able to pass this flow through the bridge opening that's really going to protect the existing floodplain elevations upstream and downstream. So a challenge that you see with a lot of ODOT, things that are designed for a lower design storm, is that as the area upstream develops, as it becomes more impervious, then that 50-year storm is now the 10-year storm.
Right.
And so I think that there is room to be conservative, and that's definitely something that the city has considered with previous engineering design criteria discussions. Is for brand new locations, it's better to be on the conservative side and make that bigger than trying to maybe only look at a smaller storm and then you back up the water behind the embankment there.
Okay, appreciate it.
Can I speak to the civic issue?
Yes, please.
So I do want to point out that zoning will controls, and this is a case-by-case basis. So we do have protections in place right now for civic applications, and the notification process will still be the same for neighbors and in the paper. Just as a staff member who will be implementing the plan, I think having dashes just leads to more confusion down the road. Because if you have, like if you're in urban low and someone comes in for a school, which they might not necessarily even be required to come before us to do that, that is appropriate. But then if it's more intense use, there are protections written into the plan, and there would be protections in the zoning as well. So taking out all of the compatibility matrix would really kind of leave us open to a lot of weird interpretations down the road. So something to consider from an implementation standpoint. Does that clear it up at all? Add more confusion?
I think my concern still stands the same, just partly because we did have such a broad definition of civic. Trying not to have to rewrite the wheel. A lot of people put a lot of more energy and time into it than even I did, just reviewing and coming up with comments. So it's really just, there's not like an infrastructure separation from educational or some of these other uses. And you know, next to, for example, open space, an amphitheater next to open space might make a lot of sense, but maybe not a different use that within that civic definition. So I did appreciate that in that civic, the actual pages of civic being defined, there are some examples of what would be more or less appropriate. So I did recognize and see that, but using this as a tool that is also easy to interpret and to see, I think this could give the wrong impression that civic is always at this high compatibility when there's probably always something within the civic use that is at a very high compatibility, but a lot of things that would fall into civic would also frequently not be at a high compatibility, and it's a lot of case by case on that.
What if, instead of dashing it, what if where it says civic, it just additionally said maybe in parentheses, compatibility dependent upon zoning appropriateness or something to that effect?
Well,
to indicate
the
there
whole
are
plan
limitations.
is written that way, so that is how it would be implemented and interpreted on our side, and how the staff report would read. So it depends what the application is. It's not necessarily just because you're bringing a civic use, you're absolutely compatible. So this is one of many factors to consider, and it is case by case, so it does depend on the use. So
I think the concern is this tool is not just for city staff to use. Having it be clearly, I guess, anyone to be able to interpret it and to understand there are limitations. So there might be someone that looks at this and goes, great, I should be able to get this approved.
but they would also have to read, so I'm not
No,
trying to
and
sound
I know,
argumentative.
there's lots of things to look
They would have
into.
to read the civic section as well, character area, all of these things would apply with extra buffers and other factors to consider, plus zoning.
This was also on my notes, and I didn't mention it this before, but also on that graphic, a subtitle, because most people look for subtitles on pictures and demographics. It's how textbooks have taught us to look at what the figure means. But a clarification, just more simply in language, that the higher the number, the more compatible. We talked about that actually when we were doing our example training, but having that more specifically on there would also be helpful.
And that's on page 159, I think.
159.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember us talking about that at the training as well.
Any other commissioner discussion or questions for the presenters?
No questions, but just addressing your question about inclusion of recommendations. However, we need to do that in a motion later. I think it would be best, speaking to Commissioner Byrd and Commissioner Kendall's both language recommendations in addition to substantive changes in the civic section. I'm open to that, and I have no issue with what's been discussed. But there's no way I could put that in a motion. Sorry, I repeat that in a motion. I support it, though.
Thank you. Okay, well, if no other questions for staff, and that was also our applicant presentation, we do have an audience comment for this. Oh, just kidding. Does any other member of the audience wish to make a comment? Seeing none, any additional planning commission discussion? Oh, yes, go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, I'm so awkward. What if we did 3s instead of 5s? So it's middle of the road, depends on.
I would feel significantly more comfortable with that. Very good compromise.
Dashes just, I don't like the dash.
I would feel significantly more comfortable with a 3.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
3 on the table on page 159 instead of creating a dash on the arrow on the page prior. Okay, just for anyone following along.
I'm happy to make this motion, but if anybody else would like to, I'll go ahead and make the motion, and then we can discuss and make an amendment to the motion if we would like to. I think that might behoove everybody. So it's not usual for me to make the motion, but I'd like to make a motion that the following language changes be made on page 35 in that top left box, that the word cell be struck. On page 46, the word poor in relation to poor active transportation be changed to the word limited. On page 48, the word inconvenient with relation to existing but largely inconvenient public transit access be changed to the word limited. On page 159, within the compatibility matrix, the civic compatibility number across the line be changed from 5 to 3. And a clarifying comment on that compatibility matrix that the higher the number, the more compatible, or otherwise more clearly stating how the 1 to 5 scale works. Did I?
And probably needs to be one motion for all of the changes?
Yes.
Or do they?
I'm
need to
sorry,
be
there
two
was
separate?
also, I might need, how about I'm going to make this motion, and then would you like to offer an amended motion for
To
your,
add to it?
for your items? You mentioned item 40, page 40 and 113, so we're, thank you, Jane, for helping with
Yes.
this. So I'm going to make that motion, and then as a point of order, Beth may need to clarify with me if we need to second it or help us to achieve this.
Hi, Beth Muckola, City Attorney's Office. Actually, I was going to say, I'm not sure that this is the type of thing that actually needs to be in a formal motion. I want to clarify, but I believe staff's plan is to document your comments and recommendations in detail, and they'll be taken forward in a memo that goes to City Council, and so they will see those comments probably along with staff explanation and clarification as well.
Okay.
That's how we did it with the last comprehensive plan. So this isn't like a PUD with an ordinance that you would need to document that in your actual vote. You can, I just don't know that it's necessary.
So it wouldn't actually be an amendment, though, as we're saying this. This would be a recommendation to
Recommendation.
approve with the amendment. And actually, I will need to reread the items in order to make those changes. I just remembered that. Thank you so much. So are your requested items that we discussed also for the roundabouts, were they in the transportation plan specifically, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to read our land use plan so we can make a vote on our land use plan.
Okay.
And what you could do is if you wish to make the motion for approval subject to the comments you've already outlined in the discussion
Thank
today,
you.
that'd be a quicker way.
Thank you. It looks like, yeah, okay. All right, going to, is there any other discussion before I can turn?
Actually, I'm confused. I think that what Beth just said is the more appropriate motion to make. rather than being very specific. And I just want to say that. I'm not sure what the motion is at this point, but I don't think we need to get in the very nitty-gritty of striking words. I think if they're taking notes, they will look at that as moving forward. I think that's
I have a comment
excessive.
on the motion that hasn't been seconded. Is more procedural. We've been at it for an hour and a half since the last break. Maybe and this is a lot, maybe if we took a break for a few minutes and then we collected our thoughts. So if we want to make recommendations in that break, we collect our thoughts. That way we can write them out and have it, very clearly and orderly put forward.
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
I was just going to say, while you're considering this on your break, as Beth said, we intended to so typically we don't have verbatim minutes that move forward from Planning Commission to City Council, and we won't have verbatim minutes moving forward this time. But our intent was to really be very thorough on all of the comments and all of the recommendations that you have as requests to move forward. So, as Beth said, we don't have to necessarily make these amendments per document, but we will have a memo that goes forward that will outline all of this.
In relation to that, though, also in other items, we do specifically to make it part of, if we feel that this is part of our, I guess it really would come down to if we feel like it is a requirement to make it move forward, and as a condition of the approval, that would be, just like on other items, something that would need to be on the recommendation specifically, just like a PUD item or something to that nature. Also, I'm in favor of taking a break to collect thoughts, but just a reminder of Quorum and Open Meetings Act as we do so. Okay, I'm going to call a 5-minute break. Ready? Okay, I'm going to call our meeting back into session. Okay, where we had left off before we went on to break, I did incorrectly brought it up as an amendment. There wasn't truly a motion there. We do actually have to read the item before any votes or anything can be made, so I would like to withdraw that comment. It was also not seconded yet, so we didn't have a true motion fully on the table yet. So starting with reading our first item, we will need to vote on each of these separately. We have item number 7, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-101, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Land Use Plan. In relation to this item, I would, if there's no other discussion by commission, I'd like to make a motion that we approve as presented, knowing that we will have those comments given along to council. Second. Oh, hang on, sorry. Can you say that again?
Second.
And a vote? Just one sec.
Just kidding.
You may vote now.
All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Moving to item number 8, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-102, recommendation resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Housing Strategy Plan. I would take a motion on this item.
I make a motion to approve.
And a vote?
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it
Moving to item number 9, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-103, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Water Utility Master Plan. I would take a motion. And a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Item number 10, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-104, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Wastewater Utility Master Plan. I would take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Moving to item number 11, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-105, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Stormwater Master Plan update. I would take a motion.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been 7-1.
Moving to item number 12, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-106, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Transportation Plan update. Again, with the note on this one that we have comments from Commissioner Kendall to be included when this goes to City Council. I would take a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote.
And item number 3, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of resolution R-2425-107, recommendation regarding a resolution of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, adopting the AIM-Norman Parks and Recreational Cultural Master Plan. I would take a motion.
I move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote.
Okay.
All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Moving to our next non-consent item, number 14, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance O-2425-32, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending sections throughout Chapter 36 zoning of the code in order to update and add references to the city's comprehensive plan, to update language to ensure compatibility with the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Plan and its various included master plans, and to clarify or correct language, including for errors and providing for the severability thereof. I would take our staff application.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Again, Beth Muckala with the City Attorney's Office. I think O-2425-32 is the first one that's up. Okay. So it's really common that when a municipality revises its comprehensive plan that you see ordinance amendments come at the same time. And so that's what we're doing here. Of course, you know from discussion that city staff anticipates revising the zoning ordinance and the subdivision codes pretty comprehensively pretty soon as well in response to the ultimately adopted plans. So in addition to replacing various terminology to ensure consistency with the new plan, these ordinances aim to kind of bridge the gap in the time between the passage of the ultimately adopted comprehensive plans and the implementation of new ordinances and regulations. So O-2425-32 specifically references revisions to Chapter 36, which is our zoning ordinance. In both of the ordinances I'm going to talk about tonight, the most important part, I think, is the new definitions. In the past, we've used the word comprehensive plan a little bit loosely, but in a lot of cases, we've been referring almost directly to the land use plan, and we've been making those things synonymous. But the truth is, comprehensive plans really do address a lot more areas than just land use. Here we have the AIM-Norman Comprehensive Plan Package, which was a large initiative including 7 separate master plans, and probably a larger part of the discussion has been over the land use component, which has sections referencing all of the others and kind of ties them together, as you know. But now the definition of comprehensive plan will be referring to that package, not just the land use, but the other 6 master plans that have been discussed here tonight. And then sub-definitions for each of those plans are included, and that's the terminology you'll now see in the zoning ordinance when it's referring in particular to one of those plans. Okay, so I wanted to go through these. Obviously, your staff report gives a little more detail, and you can see the actual red line additions in your packet. But just to summarize these sections I've listed essentially in that first bullet point, those are the ones within Chapter 36 that are adopting and incorporating those new definitions and just clarifying what we're talking about. And in most cases, we're talking about comprehensive plan generally as the whole package. In 36.510 and 36.533, I implemented correction to misnumberings for sections that were already being addressed in other ways. You'll see those. And then in 36.513, that is the only actual zoning district that you're going to see in this, and that's the RE. It previously referred to language drawn directly from our old land use plan, and by old I guess I mean current right now land use plan, which is a reference to suburban residential growth area. Going forward, we're going to be referring to the rural character area. Okay, in section 36-538, that section was literally passed in response to the adoption of the current land use plan, our Norman 2025. So because that's been addressed by other measures since the adoption of that plan, and because literally that northern community separator won't exist anymore, that language, that entire section is being stricken. Okay, and in 36-545, this relates to the placement of TV radio transmission towers. It refers to the quote current urban service area, which is a creature of the current plan. Going forward, if this is adopted, it will refer geographically to the areas falling between 48th West and 48th East. And that was the closest approximation of what that current urban service area is. And it was meant just to, again, kind of bridge that gap and go forward on a standard we're already familiar with. And finally, these four sections, 509 is PUDs, 510 is SPUDs, and then we have special uses in 560 and zoning amendments generally in 571. There were already references to comprehensive plan generally in 509 and 510, the PUD, SPUD, and of course there's really good reason for that. When you're writing your own zoning, you're going to want to draw directly back to that comprehensive plan and consider that because you're not drawing directly from a zoning ordinance that's telling you exactly what should be there. Similarly, state statutes, other cities refer to the comp plan in the context of special uses and zoning amendments, and so we're adding those references here as a means of discussing the consistency or inconsistency of applications with the underlying plan. It's just one of many factors, and because the adoption of this plan is based on police power, which is founded on the principles of public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, and because our zoning ordinance is passed on those very same factors, it's consistent to draw from that, as long as it's, one and only one factor, and as long as we're also being true to what the zoning ordinance says, because the zoning ordinance, being a more specific implementation of the plan, is going to control over general policies that are in place in just the land use plan itself. So that's something important to consider when you're looking at those staff reports and looking at how staff describes the consistency. Okay, and so this is your timeline moving forward. Following the vote tonight, it is expected that this ordinance will be considered on first reading June 10th, second and final June 24th, along with the City Council's consideration of the 7 master plans. And I'm available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, are there any audience comments? Any other planning commission discussion? And if not, I would take a motion.
Move to approve. Second then.
And a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Moving to our next item, number 15, consideration of approval, acceptance, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of Ordinance O-2425-31, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Norman, Oklahoma, amending Chapter 20, Licenses and Occupations, Section 20-1910, Premises Maintained, and to sections throughout Chapter 30 subdivisions of the code in order to update definitions, to update and add references to the city's comprehensive plan, to require a 30-acre minimum lot size for rural certificates of survey with an urban reserve land use designation, to update language to ensure compatibility with the AIM Norman Comprehensive Plan and its various included master plans, and to clarify or correct language, including for errors and providing for the severability thereof. I would take the staff presentation again.
Thank you. So this is O-2425-31. The motivations and the goals behind these amendments are the same as O-2425-32, except that these are revisions outside of the zoning ordinance and to chapters 20 and 30 of the code. So there is only one revision. I should mention, the definitions are just the same in these sections as in the zoning ordinance section we were just talking about. Okay, so 20-1910 is the only provision that you're going to see a revision in this ordinance for. It's in our licensing zone and licensing code, and it's discussing fencing surrounding oil wells. This language, like the transmission towers, was talking about current urban service areas. So again, we've substituted the 48's language to approximate what was already applying in that case. Okay, and so next is the list of sections where, again, we are simply trying to incorporate the new definitions and terminology describing these plans. In 30-105, we are adding a reference to the comprehensive plan that matches the reference that is already found in 30-301. Now, I didn't put this in your packet, but 30-301 is the section that refers to preliminary plats, and it has literally the same language with the minimum requirements of the comprehensive plan and this code that was taken directly from there and just transplanted for consistency purposes in 30-105. The last section addressed in this ordinance is 30-606. And as the staff report indicated, this is the one substantive implementation moving in the direction that would actually implement part of the plan. And this addresses Norman Rural Certificates of Survey. As you know, COSs come here as an exception or variation to the platting process. They're a little bit simpler, and they avoid some of the development requirements of platting. So in rural sections, they have been a more popular subdivision mechanism. In these changes, we identify the applicability based on the land use plan language that we have now so that it's clear where we're doing this still. And we are also implementing a 30-acre minimum for those properties that are found in the urban reserve land use area in the new plan. And again, this is just implementing the policies that are in there about not subdividing below 30 acres in that particular area. For your reference, the language that I'm talking about is in pages 1862 and 1863 of your packets if you wanted to take a closer look. But otherwise, it's the same schedule as the other ordinance. Both of these will be going along with the adoption or the consideration of adopting the 7 AIM master plans to City Council on the 24th of June. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions by commission for the applicant? Any audience comments? Oh, yep, we have one.
Oh, no.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just getting ready to make a motion.
Okay. Any planning commission discussion? Seeing none, I would take a motion
I move to approve.
And I'll second.
and a vote.
You may vote. All votes have been cast and it carries 8-0.
Okay, moving to miscellaneous discussion. Are there any comments for planning commission or staff? I just want to add, there were a lot of things I really liked in the plan. I did not go out of my way to name everything that I really enjoyed for sake of time at this meeting, but it was a very good document. It took a lot of work. Everybody else already gave the accolades, so just for 5 seconds, we do really appreciate all of the work that it took and all of the man hours and people that went into it. And I'm very grateful to have a new comprehensive plan coming our way. If there's no other discussion, I will call the meeting adjourned.